Hello! Today we are going to talk about a big old honking subject, but first of all, thank you very much to Daft Wee Haggis for your very generous coffee donation. That is super cool of you. You are a very generous and very daft haggis, so thank you very much indeed for that. If any of you guys would like to support the channel financially, I have a coffee link in the description and in my banner art, but it is of course more than enough that you guys are here watching my videos, and it's so lovely. So thank you ever so much everybody for being here. Today we're going to talk about quite a delicate subject. We are going to talk about the idea that Vikings were white supremacists. That's right, here it comes. So, let's turn back the clock. Not quite as far as you think. We're going to turn back the clock to the Enlightenment, to the 18th century. So, during the 18th century, people enjoyed reading classical literature. Towards the end of the 18th century, classical literature and classical Greek and Roman culture became very, very important, and it became very, very fashionable in Europe, in particular in places like the Germanys, in Italy, in France, and in the UK. And it was the UK at this point. So an awful lot of people are reading accounts by people like Tacitus and Julius Caesar, who talk about Germany. They talk about the Germans. When Julius Caesar and Tacitus talk about generic German people, they're talking about just that. They're talking about this generic lump of we don't know because we haven't invaded them. They are talking about the people of the forests east of the Rhine that they haven't got round to attacking yet. They don't know who's there. They haven't sent out anthropological study parties to see who these Germans are. They just say, oh, the Germans live over there. When people in the Enlightenment read these accounts, they then think, okay, so there is this unified culture called Germania. There is this unified German culture in what is now modern-day Germany. Two of the surprising people who you might not know subscribed to this idea were the Brothers Grimm. So Jakob and Wilhelm Grimm were writers working in Germany in the earlier part of the 19th century who wrote fairy tales, the Grimm's fairy tales. But they didn't just write fairy tales. What they were trying to do was prove that Germany had this single mythological past, that German culture comes from this single unified mythological world. They were trying to show that all these fairy tales, Little Red Riding Hood and all of that, and the Pied Piper of Hamelin, were all drawn from the same Germanic well of myths and legends. They didn't really have any particular evidence for some of this, and they turned to some pretty wacky and wild sources. They looked at law codes from some of the medieval parts of the Holy Roman Empire and tried to link them and cross-reference them with fairy tales and folk tales to try to prove that they were all making these laws based off the same sources, and sometimes they were. And most of the time that source was the Bible. So the books that they started to write became really, really influential, and it becomes part of this romantic nationalist movement in Germany. I talk about this with Liz Capism in a video that we did a few weeks ago, which is really, really good fun. I recommend you go and watch that. This romantic nationalism that feeds German writers in the 19th century. And one thing that most of these people subscribe to, at least earlier on in the 19th century, is this Aristotelian idea of climate. Aristotle's climate theory is the theory that the people of Northern Europe live in a climate that is cold, which makes them brutish, it makes them primitive, they drink heavily, they fight all the time, they eat loads of red meat, and they worship their mothers and womenfolk. Okay. People south of the Mediterranean in Africa are lazy, they're lethargic, they are stupid, they don't learn, they don't work, they can't read, they never make anything of themselves. People in the Mediterranean, literally the middle of the earth, are in the perfect middle zone. They are in the perfect middle zone, and therefore they are in the perfect position to become the fathers of democracy and child abuse. Perfect! So there's a lot of this going around in what becomes Germany, in the German-speaking world in Central Europe in the 19th century. I'm not even going to bother talking about Wagner. Wagner was a bit of a nutcase. His sister was even worse and was an actual genuine racist. Towards the end of the 19th century, a Brit stands up and takes the wacky Germanophilic crown. Houston Stewart f***ing Chamberlain. This guy is the whole deal. If you want a late Victorian pseudo-scientist nutter that basically invented Nazism, I found you one. So as a kid, this guy was a liberal Francophile who refused to speak English because he thought French was more beautiful. He then had a religious experience whilst listening to a Wagner opera and decided that Germany was the most wonderful thing that anybody had ever created, and he was going to become the most German creature on earth. At one point, this guy is known as Hitler's John the Baptist. Gross. So Chamberlain writes a really, unfortunately, influential book that is entirely made up. It's all complete garbage, and it's called The Foundations of the 19th Century. I've read it, it's awful. I read it for you. You do not need to read it. If you have half a brain, it will make you super angry. It is full of absolutely hog wild nonsense. He uses the term the Jew for a start. He claims that all ancient Europeans, the Romans, the Greeks, the Latins, the Celts, were Aryans, which is a meaningless term to describe white people in this context. The actual Aryan civilization was kind of from Central Eurasia, so it's really funny that these people have latched onto this term. But in terms of the Aryans being these white superhumans, it has no basis in science, archaeology, anthropology, cultural history, or anything else. He goes on to say that the top of the pile, in terms of the races of people, are the Nordic people. They are blonde-haired, blue-eyed, stereotypical supermen. This is where it all comes from. This guy, this f***ing dude, is where all of this comes from. A 19th century, mad, posh, British idiot. He is convinced that the Nordic people are at the top of the pile. He also thinks that Jewish people invented Roman Catholicism and democracy as a failed sociological experiment. He also claims that the Jewish people invented China. He proves this by saying, get this, neither of them has any culture. Absolute psycho. He says that the Germans and the Jewish race have been in mortal combat since forever because Jewish people want to enslave the whole world. Made up, obviously, by him. He was nuts. This guy was full on 100% cuckoo bananas on the loopy juice. He was criticised heavily in Germany, where he moved, obviously, for becoming an Überdeutsch. He wanted to be more German than the Germans. He would actually argue with people from Germany and claimed that he knew more about Germany than German scholars because he had this religious experience listening to Wagner. The man was just an absolute nutcase. Perhaps most frighteningly of all, in this book, he comes up with the term the Jewish problem, and he asks his readers to come up with a final solution to it. It is scary how much of what the Nazi Party spouts in the 30s and 40s is lifted from a book made up by this complete lunatic. He made it all up. It is made up nonsense. The idea that these northern Nordic Europeans are some kind of super race is based on nothing more than this vague 19th century dream world where Germany is the ideal and the worst of Germans is better than the best of any other country because they are descended from some mythical Nordic German race that never existed. So just to reiterate, all of this is totally made up bullcrap from a loser who couldn't make friends. Okay? Cool. Moving on. We've now got the roots of this. We've got the roots of this crazy Nordic idea that the Nordic people are these white supermen who are locked in combat with Jewish and non-white people. Let's talk about Herman Wirth. So Herman Wirth was a pseudo-historian and Germanomaniac, born in the Netherlands, who got a PhD in music, taught Dutch for a bit, lost a series of lecturing jobs for being crap, got kicked out of several universities for being a nutter, joined the Nazi Party in 1925, where he was welcomed with open arms because he was a massive racist dick. And, I mean, look at him, what a nerd. Like, would you trust your child with this man? I don't think so. So, Wirth translated this book called the Oera Linda book. The Oera Linda book, or the Oera Linda book, is a fake document claiming to be written in Old Frisian. So, if you are Frisian, you are from this area. It is supposedly full of ancient Frisian mythological symbolism. It was proven to be a fake very, very quickly when it was first discovered in the 1860s, but it is still used as a source for many neo-pagan religions today, and it is just wacky stuff in there. It claims that there was an ancient island culture on this nation that bridged Northern Europe and North America, and this ancient island culture was called, you guessed it, Atlantis. So Milo and the gang were all made up of this advanced Aryan civilization. There's that word again, Aryan, which doesn't mean anything in this context. It is useless and stupid. They had a monotheistic religion with a goddess that inspired Judaism and Christianity. When Wirth translated the book, of course, he twisted that into the Jews stole our religion because he was a racist and an anti-Semite. So he actually joined Hitler's SS and founded the Ahnenwerber with Heinrich, definitely an Aryan, blonde, blue-haired super god, look at me now, Himmler, which was a research organisation, the Ahnenwerber, and it was basically just there to justify the Nazi idea that Germans were descended from a biologically superior race of Aryan supermen. Complete nonsense, made up by a British loser. It is a machine to perpetuate their made-up nonsense. Himmler kicks Wirth out of the Ahnenwerber because his views are too wild, which tells you something, and Himmler uses the Oera Linda book so much that it is to this day known as Himmler's Bible. So everything that Heinrich, totally a blonde-haired, blue-eyed German supergod Himmler, used to justify his monstrous actions comes from this made-up book, badly translated by a Dutch musicologist. What a loser. So during the Second World War, Himmler also claims that bog bodies are evidence that ancient peoples massacred and ritually buried their gay populations. What? Total nonsense, made up by a creepy, weasel-faced little loser. So some of these people after World War II, including Wirth, escape execution and imprisonment after the Nuremberg trials, and they go on to spread their made-up, racist nonsense. That's why this exists. That is why this concept of the Vikings being white supremacist and being somehow superior exists. It's nothing to do with anything that the Vikings wrote. If you are expecting me to tell you that they twisted sources from the Viking period, that's not where this is going, because there aren't any. There are no sources from the Viking period that suggest in any way that they were white supremacists. The Vikings didn't think that they were some kind of noble super race. Alright? They just didn't. There is no evidence. And don't come at me in the comments, because you are wrong if you think that. I promise you I've looked. I promise you I have looked. I looked through the sagas. Oh, there's somebody called Blue. The blue means he was black, which meant that they didn't like black people. Bullshit. That's not what it means. Don't talk nonsense. Oh, they used the word Skraeling to describe Native American people. That meant that they were racist against North Americans. No, it's not. They didn't even use that word before the 12th century, so it's highly unlikely that they actually used that word at all to describe them. Oh my god. It's made up nonsense, guys. The Vikings were not white supremacists. The concept of white supremacy would have been totally... Dude. What? Are you a white supremacist? The hell is one of those? Yeah, I rest my case. See, he has no idea. He has no idea. You have no idea. I got no idea. He has no idea. The concept would have been alien to them. The idea that white people are somehow biologically superior to non-white people, that's crazy. They were working for non-white people in the Byzantine Empire. Vikings, these noble blonde-haired supermen, were working for non-white people. They were trading with them. They were living with them. They were marrying them. We've got people of African origin living and working in Viking Age Scandinavia and York. We have their bones. The exceptional thing about the Vikings wasn't that they were brutal, racially pure Northern Europeans, because they weren't any of those things. They weren't brutish and primitive at all. They were a highly advanced, sophisticated society. They just happened to not be Christian at a time where Christians were writing bad stuff about non-Christians. They were big players in an international trading network that went from North America to China, for goodness sake. That is what is exceptional about the Vikings, not the fact that most of them were white. And yeah, most of them were white, but I'm white, and I'm certainly not a white supremacist. There is no evidence at all that they were white supremacists, or that they were racists. They lived with, they loved, they married, they traded with, and they worked with and for non-white people from all over their trading world. They welcomed Islamic and Arabic people into their communities, like Ibn Fadlan, who wrote about their cultures and their way of life. They welcomed them with open arms into their communities, and some of them even went back down to the south. Europe was absolutely dependent on the Mediterranean in the Viking period. Europe was not dependent on the Vikings at all. It really wasn't, guys. I'm really sorry. If you think that the Vikings were the centre of medieval Europe, you are absolutely barking up the wrong tree. I'm really sorry. So, were the Vikings white supremacists? No. Of course not. That was all made up in the 19th century. And then it was jumped on by a bunch of angry German and Austrian mega losers who managed to keep power for, 12 years? And then they all killed themselves. Oh, and if you think that the Vikings were white supremacists, or you use the Vikings or their symbolism to promote your white supremacist ideals, you're a loser. You're a massive, massive loser, and I feel sorry for you. So, thank you very much once again for watching. I hope you enjoyed that video. I hope it was a little bit informative for you and took you on a direction that you weren't expecting it to. Thank you ever so much to everyone who has subscribed recently. I'm super pleased that so many people are subscribing to the channel. It's amazing. I can't believe it. Diolch yn fawr iawn, unwaith eto am wylio, a na i weld chi tro nesa. Hwyl am y tro. Bye for now. Haven't you saved the website? Why have you not done the thing? Please do the thing, or I will eat you. I will eat you as a light supper. You cannot stop me. I am the Viking man, and I'm here to say that I would very much like to spend the day farming along with you. Viking farmers are the chaps. We come along wearing buttless chaps. Give me the meat and then fill in the gaps. I'm a sailor and I am nice. Viking sandwich every day. I love my sandwiches, hip hip hooray.